So it's good to see everyone here and everyone online. So thank you so much. So a little bit about 12-Step Ministry. We are located on Northwest Highway in the center of Dallas. We've been in the same location since 1985, and we've actually been having meetings since then. We host 12-step traditional recovery support meetings. And so what we've noticed in some changes is that that as people are seeking their recovery, families are having a hard time navigating that support for their families. And so I'm grateful that we were asked here today to kind of talk about it. Whoop, change. Nope, nope. So, luckily I have my print here. So, when did 12 steps actually start? That's kind of, the beginning. So, the first version of Alcoholics Anonymous was in 1939.
There we go.
And so that's when the first 12 steps were published. And in the Center for Spiritual Development, which is where 12-Step Ministry lives, has been hosting meetings since 1985. For those of you who might not have been to the center, this is actually what our house looks like. Our little cottage that is still standing after over almost 100 years. And that is the living space there. So when you walk in, that's kind of the home-like feel that we provide. And I think that has really been most of our success. Right now we host 43 meetings a week. We're seeing about 1,500 to 1,700 people in person a month and about 500 online. So we're averaging about 2,000 people, and that's, pre-COVID, we were seeing about 5,000 visits a month. So really these are visits and not necessarily people, because one person could attend the same, 2 different meetings. So connecting with the program. So my experience, I've been kind of gathering some of my experience just in being the executive director and trying to understand the different components of 12-step, not only for those who are struggling with the disease themselves, but really what the family is doing and how they're having to navigate change. Because the initial phone call that I usually get is, my family member needs help. And so, but therein lies one of the problems, right? Is that the family member is the one calling saying, I have a family member who needs help. So kind of the journey of recovery, some of us in this room are familiar with it, maybe some of us aren't, but let's just talk about it. I can't control my behavior. Addictive behavior, when we talk about an individual who has addictive behavior and we look at the family unit as well, we become addicted to our addict a lot of times. And so I speak about this through personal experience because I have individuals in my family, some have chosen to recover and some have not. So, even the shame that comes along with a family that has someone who is struggling, do you, gather up with your friends on the weekend and say, oh yeah, by the way, my brother, right, is in jail because you might say that, but my child, sometimes we still keep that the deep, dark secret, which is part of the shame that it talks about here. So, the language is kind of the same. So when an addict talks about staying sober, finding their recovery, the family has to, in my opinion, has to talk that same language within the family unit. Because the family has a level of sobriety, because they're changing the way that they're navigating their loved one's disease. And they're not really navigating it. They're individuals navigating it, but we get all meshed and bound up and kind of all of a sudden it becomes one big problem when the family member is, it's really okay for the family member to say, I'm gonna stay in recovery. I'm gonna do my recovery process while you do yours. So this is kind of how we're gonna navigate into the topic. Guiding principles. So I like these because I really like, and I actually even, and for those of you online, you might have to see this. This is my book. My book is Today a Better Way. This is
you're gonna have to mute again. Turn down, turn on speaker.
Okay. So still navigating technology in these days. So I've been in a program since 2013 called Families Anonymous, and that's where I'm keeping sober. I like to look at that as that's how I'm staying sober. And so recovery emerges from hope. For me, there's always hope. And I walk alongside families that feel hopeless at times because sometimes their loved one, again, has chosen to recover or not. And so how do we as a family member continue to navigate our lives knowing that there's still the tornado that's going on in the background? The belief that recovery is real provides essential and motivating message of a better future. What does that look like? What does that mean, right? Recovery is person-driven. Self-determination and self-direction. And so even though the person who is struggling is also hearing the same language, right? So we're trying to take the same language that they're hearing and apply that same and those same principles and understand that same language for ourselves, but how does it apply to us? Many pathways. Of course, there are a billion pathways to recovery. We've got a lot of different ways. We've got therapeutic models. We've got support. We've got 12 steps. We've got smart recovery. We've got a whole lot of ways. We've got celebrate recovery. So, you know, there's all of these buckets that we can fall in and to find a pathway that works for us. Holistic. And that's a big term when it comes to, and a big word when it comes to how we as family members are navigating, right? Because although our loved one who is struggling is working on a holistic path for their recovery, we have to do the same as a family member. Peers and allies, mutual support, and mutual aid groups, including the sharing of experiential knowledge and skills. You know, they're sharing their experience, strength, and hope in their support, and we do the same as family. Relationship and social networks, as we're finding. So even at our ministry, when COVID first hit, people were needing their recovery support so badly that they were meeting in their cars in the parking lot when the building was closed. They would circle around in their vehicles and look at each other and do phone meetings. They'd meet outside when it was hot and they were sweating, but their recovery was so important to them and their social network was so important for their recovery. It was pretty a very beautiful thing to see, actually. Culturally based in influence, culture and cultural background in all of its diverse representations, values, traditions, beliefs. Those are all things that, for me personally, kind of drive me in which pocket of recovery support I look for. Individual, family, and community strengths and responsibility. Individuals, families, and communities have strengths and resources that serve as a foundation for recovery. Because when we live in the dark, we stay in the dark. And so I think what we're experiencing even at the ministry is that there are so many people that are no longer, they still have the fear and the shame of seeing somebody that they are going to know or, and be familiar with, and they're going to walk in and they're going to see that, whether it's family support or individual support. But that barrier seems to be, at least right now, as we're assessing the damage of COVID, right, and what we need, is that is not necessarily hindering them from moving forward like it used to. Recovery is actually changing. We're actually seeing it change. Respect, in family recovery and in any kind of recovery support, the respect is really important. And that's, the anonymity part that really kind of is the glue. There is a need to acknowledge that taking steps towards recovery may require great courage, because it is a very courageous move to go, I need to take a look at myself. And that takes a lot of courage. So how kind of some things have changed with kind of how families navigate the difficulties of this disease with someone that they love. And I have experience in this. My family started not necessarily 12 steps, but tough love, along with treatment and things of that nature for my brother, actually, who has still not chosen to recover at this point. But it was tough love. It was all or nothing. Kick them out. It was that really tough, just get them out of your life kind of way. And that was really tough, because in my circumstance, and with a lot of families that were in the program that we were in, many husbands and wives had to separate because either the husband or the wife did not agree with how the program model was to be activated, and they would have to split. And my parents were one of those. They split. And because it was a requirement that the whole family participated. And my dad wasn't buying into the same program that my mom was working on, so they actually split. So kick them out, have nothing to do with them. It's not my problem, it's their problem. Parents to separate, as I mentioned. Siblings, did not participate. Back in those days, sober living looked like, especially for kids that were 18 years and younger, was somebody laid in front of the door while the 4 kids were in the bedroom and they would not let them, out. And so that was pretty tough, tough to watch. It was always a secret. It's still a secret. In my program, there are times that we experience, as I mentioned, gathering with friends and talking about things, but there's something tough going on, and we still don't share, still don't share. Isolate, move to another area, which has happened quite a bit since I've been in the program since 2013 as an adult. While in treatment, stating the patient is, not loved because they choose to take drugs. So these are old ways of the old language that is finally starting to go away. Limiting anything that gives them joy. This was all really how, or what the suggested format to dealing with someone who had the disease of addiction was. It was just completely separate yourself from them. So now is, and even with Families Anonymous coming in, of course, there's Al-Anon, which is an old go-to, which is still a great program, but there's a little bit of differences in some of these new family support meetings and groups. It's not an all or nothing approach. I may be able to tolerate my loved one living in my home while they're using. I may be able to tolerate it. That might be my level of being able to tolerate, but you can't drink in my home. You can't bring alcohol in my home, but you could come home under the influence. So now what we're recognizing in the family unit is that there, instead of it just being all or nothing, there are some levels that we're able to tolerate some behavior. And because it's too hard to think of them living in their car or on the street. And so, you know, willing to do this much, but not everything. The family is more aware of the challenges, parents working together as a unit, where it's not mom making the decision or dad making the decision. There's more of a unit making a decision, which has strengthened the family, which is a really great dynamic. Siblings are now engaged, where it's like, well, we can't talk to Joe about it because he doesn't need to know what's going on. Well, now it's having the whole family talk about it, let it be out into the open so that each person within the family can be supportive and doesn't go, well, just tell him to stop. That doesn't work. So if you're not talking about it with any extension of the family that may have access to the individual who's struggling, that's always going to be the mentality. But now they're talking about it. So that's a really, really positive thing that we're seeing. Allowing input from others, even those that are struggling, that feels very still kind of unfamiliar to me or uncomfortable. Because why am I gonna let somebody give me their opinion if they're in their disease? Why would I do that? That just seems, I struggle with that still. I still struggle with it. I'm working on it, but I'm struggling with it because I know better, right? I know better. I'm the parent or I'm the loved one that has experience, and in my infinite wisdom, if you do this, I know that it's going to happen like this. So, you know, it still feels uncomfortable, but I'm working on it. Families recognize it's a disease and not a choice. You know, that is finally becoming the regular language, which is so great. Gentler approach in treatment. It's allowing them to make the decision where they might want to go. They might want to go out of state. They may want to stay here. They might need 20 days. They may think they need 90 days. So it's allowing for them now to help in the decision-making process of that. Recognizing the trauma, talking about it, that's a really big deal. Group support without humiliation. For me, you need to comes out of my language. And that's really hard because, and I'll tell you why, and how I experience it, but also others that I know are kind of experiencing it, is you need to, if my friend Joan is doing something and I say, well, Joan, you need to, and then I'm talking to the person in my life who's struggling, you need to, I'm using the same language in both, and guess what? It doesn't work because the principles of the program have to be applied in all areas of our life when we have someone who's struggling, in my opinion. Because I can't just handle it here in this pocket and leave everything else to just kind of fly around. I have the application of the program through all of life circumstances makes it much easier to navigate. 12-step meetings and support, not all or nothing, no isolation. That's a tough one because in my experience, it's easy when the family member is allowed to stay at home, you've set some boundaries, and what do? They isolate in their own space because they feel like they're the outcast, they got a problem, everybody knows the problem, they got these rules, and now they're just gonna isolate. And so how do we as the family, knowing that there's a challenge, how do we pull them out of that isolation? Family visits are loving and supportive. Instead of the screaming matches of you did, right? You've done all of this, you know, laundry list of things. And sober living is also, you know, a pretty good way for individuals to navigate out of treatment. And that they are pulling in the family as part of that, not necessarily to pay the bill, but to be supportive and understand what sober living looks like inside, right? Inviting the family in, where it was more like, okay, we're going to isolate everyone in sober living, and the family gets to go over here and keep living their normal life. But then the person who is struggling is over here in the sober living environment. Well, now the sober living environment say, come on, family, come in and look and see how we do it. Because they found that, and at our ministry, there's a lot of sober living homes that bus folks over to meetings. And so I get an opportunity to talk to a lot of them. And there is this change that is happening in that whole bringing in the family and sober living, and them not feeling like they're on the island. So it's kind of nice. All right. So we'll just kind of go through this quickly. I mean, I think that, you know, most of us know of steps. So how does that work for the family? The family has to do the steps too. We have to do the steps. So powerlessness, right? I mean, this step number one, I think is the hardest, because, or maybe not the hardest, because we can say I'm powerless over, you know, other people's behavior. Not necessarily just one person, but other people's lives. And so, you know, this is, I talk about discomfort because this whole thing is about getting comfortable in the discomfort. That's what this is really about. Us as parents in particular, and loved ones, that we know what they should be doing, they don't do it. We know how this should work out and they don't do it. What happens? It's uncomfortable. It's really uncomfortable. So in the program that I participate in, we start from the beginning and we say, what is the worst thing that could happen? They could die. It's the worst thing that could happen. They could die. That's the worst thing that would happen. So when we think about the worst thing that would happen, then we're not hovering over a future that may or may not arrive, because we know that the worst thing is that they could die. And that's tough. It's uncomfortable to be powerless and recognizing, holy crap, they could die. It's like, what do I do with that? It's at the back of our minds. It whirls around, whether, no matter who the loved one is, whether it's a friend or family. I think family, it makes it a little bit more tricky because we're so closely connected. You know, it's, yes, someone could die and that would really hurt and be painful, but if it's your child, it's a little bit different. Living today and not in the future. That is the hardest thing. I think no matter what program anybody is in, most of us don't live in today. You know, we've heard one day at a time. That's like the most familiar, you know, we'll live one day at a time. I never have lived one day at a time. You know, that's a terrible, one of my terrible character defects, if you want to call it. I have a hard time living one day at a time, because there's this line in the sand that's like, okay, how do we prepare for the future and how do we live in today only? What? Wait a minute. Yeah. So I like in this part of it that we were powerless over other people's lives, because applying the program in all of my life is right there. It's about other people's lives, because I'm powerless over what anybody does, right? Hope is, you know, it's a big word. And it's like, what does that really look like? You know, what is hope? Well, hopefully they don't go to jail. Hopefully they don't, you know, live on the street. Hopefully they don't live in their car. Hopefully, it's like, what does that really mean? What does hope mean? What does that mean in the family unit when I, as a family member, have someone who's struggling, but I'm having to learn so much about myself and working the steps, because this is when it's about me. And how am I going to navigate the difficulty while my loved one is navigating their own difficulty? Higher power, you know, that is the common theme. and that you never give up faith, even when you suffer a setback. So what does a setback look like as a family member who's working through their own recovery? They got put in jail and I went and bailed them out for the 15th time. That's a setback. That's a setback when families are trying to navigate their own recovery. If that was what they set for themselves, is they said, I'm not getting them out of jail again, and then they get them out of jail, and then that's a setback. So an example of the discomfort in step 2, when we're hopeful and the outcome is not positive, such as jail. I use jail a lot but there's a laundry list, you know, living in your car, living on the street, living with friends, you know, all of the things, being, you know, in a drug house, you know, I mean, it could go on and on and on, right? But so how to live in the discomfort? Okay, put yourself here. My son is in jail. This is uncomfortable. I could get him out. And he would be, you know, I could get him out. But is that really practicing your own recovery to get him out? Is it? You know, so those tough decisions are where the family starts to navigate their own recovery. This is my favorite. Practicing the program, I wait 24 hours. It took me 1.5 years to get to that practice. And it was grueling. And it still is, I might add, very grueling. But when there is a situation, when there's a fire, I give it 24 hours. When my child who has brought me to the program calls, it goes to voicemail. Every time, grown, every time goes to voicemail. Either one of my 2 children. So I don't just practice it with one, I practice it with the other. But it goes to voicemail first. And guess what? 90% of the time, no message. They just wanted to vomit information. And guess what? The vomit lays all over me and crawls all over me. And then it becomes my problem. And I know what to do because guess what? I know what to do. I've lived that life, right? That's not practicing my own program because I'm throwing out the safety net. I'm throwing out the safety net so they don't hit the ground. And that's not practicing my program. Restoring us to sanity. That 24 hours really does work, y'all. I just want to really highly recommend it. I highly recommend it. Because if nothing else, something's going to change. So step 3, surrendering. For us, again, as a family, remind yourself that you're at the mercy of a higher power and you don't come first. You know, some days I have a hard time with that. I don't come first, but really I don't, because I am not in control of anybody else's behavior or their life. So really, I don't come first. Knowing that there's nothing that you can do to fix the situation. Okay, so that can be tricky because you could probably fix it with money or food or gas. You could fix the problem. But is it wise to do that? That's when we get down to the nitty-gritty of how are we navigating our own recovery. Practicing, call a friend, read, attend meetings. So for me, when I'm feeling in the middle of the tornado, sometimes I don't want to call a friend. Sometimes that's not my outlet. My outlet is that I sit with it inside of myself and I beat myself to death. You shoulda, you coulda, you didn't, what happened, rah, 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 all the language that I tell myself. And so that's when it's really difficult to sit with myself. That can be really uncomfortable. But again, it's going, I'm uncomfortable right now with this and I'm beating myself with the beat up stick. And so what do I need to do in order to correct? How do I take a quick left turn? And the tools that I find in my own recovery will help me to navigate out of that quickly. And that's the idea, right? To take a quick left turn, because we can always look at the past and go, I shoulda, coulda, woulda. Surrendering, yeah, higher power. There are days driving that I talk to God all the time, just help me, help me, help me, help me, help me not react to this situation. And sometimes that has to be enough. Courage. Step 4, documenting every mistake you've ever made. Oh, how do you document that when you're navigating in a family program while supporting a loved one? What does that look like? Because I could say, well, I went out with my friends, I didn't discipline her when I should have, I didn't give her the right things to eat, I didn't have her on a bedtime. I mean, I can go all the way back and just, again, figure it out. But you know what? It's okay to do that, because if I'm feeling like I made a mistake, then it's my mistake. I just need to, this is where we write it down, as painful as it may be, because it's okay for me to recognize that I'm going to feel bad about the things that I think I should have done. It's part of the process. Some of the discomfort, errors of the past, bad mom, bad dad, bad wife, bad friend, bad daughter. I mean, it covers the gamut. But there is something to be said in going and getting to the place in the program where we say, I did the best that I could in that moment, and giving ourselves the win of that, and recognizing that we are not perfect, and being okay with that. That's kind of the fun part, is recognizing that relieves me of all of this anxiety of my past. Are we letting yesterday come into today? Integrity, moral inventory, God, and to ourselves and to another person. This was probably one of the hardest things, and I think families have. This is probably one of the hardest thing, and I'm sure that the person in our family that's struggling this is really hard too, because to admit to someone else everything. But there's this beautiful thing that happens when we do it, because now it's not just inside. It's not inside anymore. We get to empty out and start all over again. So discomfort, to be honest with a loved one who is struggling about their behavior, makes the loved ones feel what? So you have someone in your family that's, struggling with drugs, and they're struggling and they're having a hard time, and they've relapsed 3 or 4 times. They've been in and out of treatment. There's been all of this stuff going on. The last thing that you want to do is sit down and say, what you do makes me feel this, because chances are it's going to have a negative connotation to it, right? But if we don't express how it makes us feel and they don't know, what are we stealing from them? We're stealing something from them by not telling them. We're saying, you can't handle it. You can't handle it. But it is important, because clear is kind. Being clear with our loved ones is the kindest thing we could do. Practicing the program, remember that being honest with yourself about how you feel, because even for me, there are times where I'm like, I'm fine. I think that's the most common. I'm fine, but I'm really not fine. Throwing out the net, trying to save our loved one from hitting the ground, experiencing the pain. If they don't experience, how do they grow? And so by throwing out the net, we're still taking care of it. And the whole idea is for us not to do that and to gently navigate. Willingness, ready to move past them, not move on. Difference, right? Defects of character, again, relying on our higher power. And there is this muscle to practice of going, I'm really giving it to my higher power for the next 2 hours, the next 6 hours, whatever's reasonable. It has to be reasonable to us. Well, we've done everything wrong. We've caused their addiction. We've caused their behavior. And, but how important is it to argue it? How important is it? I have to ask myself that daily in these days. How important is it for me to combat those comments. So I'm finding that most times it's really not that important, because I can take a left turn and I can leave the room, and I can do other things to practice my program instead of combating any comments. Change is happening. God is doing for you what you can't do for yourself. That's really when I think about how important is it, that to me is, that's my higher power doing for me what I can't do for myself, and saying, Andrea, take a pause. Take a pause. It's okay to take a pause. You're not, you're not neglectful by moving on and doing something different. It's not about being neglectful. So humility, as you did a catalog of your past, admitted, released yourself from the guilt, and 7, being willing to be released from your past. Humility is one of the simplest principles to understand because it's straightforward. It is not to me. I'm still struggling with that some days. But in a daily practice means never seeing yourself as more important than you are. Never really thought about it that way, but that is the truth of it, right? Keeping ourselves grounded, recognizing our part. That's the discomfort. When one of my children that brought me to the program decides that they're going to express to me that I have done all this really bad, terrible stuff, and that I'm really just terrible. And for me to stand there and recognize my part in that, what is that? Not happy days for me, not happy days, not happy days. Like, what is my part? I did nothing. But my part was, how did I interact? How did I allow it to happen? How did I allow my loved one to talk to me in a certain way that was unacceptable? That's my part. That's my part. So we have to, or I should say, I have to, at times, I really have to like get it down into the funnel and go, what was my part in it? And review that and try to make some change. This is a selfish program, because the program is, this is me working on myself, changing the way that I've done things, changing my behavior, approaching it in a different way. Yeah, shortcomings. Love. Love is the part of this, tough love is a very easy thing to throw around. But what does tough love look like? So I have a family member right now, and I can share about my family because they've all given me permission, and we're all a hot mess. So I'll just say that. My mom is 75, my brother's 53 years old and hasn't chosen to recover, but she's paying for him a house to live in and his electric and, all of that stuff, right? And so, but that's what's tolerable for her. It would not be tolerable for me. So the beauty of the program is that we get to decide. We get to decide what our boundaries are and what we're willing to do in love. So tough love for her is, I'm not going to give you any spending money. I'm going to pay for your rent and I'm going to pay for your utilities, but I'm not going to give you any spending money. So that's her level of tough love. Apologizing for something that our loved ones may not be aware of. What's that? What's that all about? I find this in marriage, family members that may not even be in a program, but sometimes I'll walk away from a conversation, friends, anybody, I walk away from a conversation and feel like, ouch, and the other person may not even realize, but that I quickly go and apologize relieves me. And again, that's applying the program in all our affairs, all my affairs, and everything I can. And I fail regularly, but I'm always working on it. Love deeply from a distance and setting boundaries. Only call after 5, not before 7. Because when we think of boundaries, sometimes we set boundaries that we can't uphold them. It's like, okay, so if it's that one, only call after 5, but not before 7, whatever it is. And then all of a sudden there's a call and you pick up the phone. It's like, well, but wait a minute, how are we teaching them to treat us differently and to follow what is acceptable to us? Any of my kids call me, and if I choose to pick up the phone, which is rare, I will tell you, or when I call them back and they say, Mom, I need your advice, and they know now. Mom's not going to give advice. Even if it's asked for, I'm not going to do it. So, it's just all of this, the way that love is, and willing to make amends quickly and get through it, apologizing for something that they didn't even know that they had done. Am I okay on time? Okay. Let's see. So responsibility. Principle of responsibility is reflected directly in the STEM. Practicing in life is clear. If the hope is to remain close with those around you, you must be honest and open about your mistakes that impacted them. Ouch. Oh, I don't like this one very much because, gosh, I'm my worst critic, right? So, drank too much, left you in the car. Sometimes, it's happened. I can tell you that with one of my children, I have a really deep, dark secret that she does not know. And I am uncomfortable with that all the time because I feel like there's going to come a time when she's going to want the information that I have. And it's uncomfortable. And so, I'll navigate that when it's time, but this is this discomfort of did not see warning signs, did not give you support during school, we fought, didn't offer a therapeutic solution. Again, recognizing my part in the relationship. Ask for forgiveness and listen to their side of the story, which can oftentimes be quite difficult in these days, because their opinions of how life is and how they're experiencing life is something that I have a hard time with. I'm like, seriously, you think it's okay to sleep till 10 o'clock? You think it's okay to sleep till 10 o'clock and be late for work? I mean, here, you can hear it in my voice. I'm like, you need to, does not come out, right? So, discipline. I think that when families are navigating, this is the part where change really happens. The discipline of the program, which means when I decide to apply the program through all my affairs, this is my discipline. This is where I'm going to be consistent in my message. One thing to take personal inventory and admit our wrongs one time. It takes discipline to continue to do it. It's easy to do it when there's a big blow up. Oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, you come back together, again, this isn't only with the people in our lives that are struggling with addiction. This is our husbands, our moms, our dads, our brothers, our sisters, our cousins. It can be anybody. This is the whole point, right? Is that we cannot practice recovery on one side of our life and be successful at it. It has to be applicable across the board. Admitting that it just might be a difficult day and being okay with that, because some days are just difficult, and I want to fix. I do. I want to fix, and so everything I have to work on and applying my program and reading my materials and calling friends is to stop doing that, or not stop. That's impossible. I think that's impossible, but at least to do it less often. Awareness. I think we all know what awareness looks like, and living with awareness means always paying attention to the higher power that guides you. That's kind of an interesting statement, because do we often take enough time to be quiet, to listen and pay attention to what we might need to hear, or what intuitively will come up because we've been practicing our program? it will intuitively come in. Do we give ourselves enough time before we're throwing out the safety net to pay attention to that? And that's a tough one for families, but as we exercise the muscle, it becomes very, the fruit that it bears is really great. That's where the "you need to" is removed from our vocabulary. So service, I mean, 12-step ministry was all about the step 12 and giving back and participating, you know, just offering what we're learning and providing and offering it forward. And that's how the program works, is giving away what you have so freely been given. Sharing the difficulties of life's experiences and helping someone else. That is oftentimes what I find is something that may need to be activated in a day when the world is coming to an end. The world is coming to an end. Kids are crazy. Everybody's crazy. Life's crazy. What do? I'm spinning out of control. Right now I'm like, wow. And so the best thing to do is to figure out how to help someone else. Just in that moment, make a phone call. Share your difficulty in that moment. And that does something, I think, to our spirit. And so really that's what 12 step is really about, is passing on what has been so freely given to us. So I know that we're kind of getting close on time, but so this is something, this helping, this is really, and again, this is part of Families Anonymous, my program, but I love it. And I have copies for anybody who wants to take it with them. I brought copies of it because it talks about, because there's a difference in helping and enabling, and this kind of breaks that down and separates it. My role as helper is not to do things for people. I'm trying to help, but to be things. What does that mean? That was an interesting question. Be kind, be empathetic, but don't be the problem solver. Right? So this is just so great. Negatives to positives, fear to faith, contempt for what they do, to respect for the potential within them. Because we're, you know, I think we all have a little bit of a judgmental bone, and so we're judging, right? But we're stealing the ability of our loved one to make decisions and navigate their lives, and to accept that someone else has the power over their own life and their own decisions can be very difficult, especially when we love and care for them so deeply that we want the best for them. It's like standing on the side of the road and seeing my child in this circumstance driving her car right into the wall and not doing anything about it. That is hard. But is it our place to step in front of that wall? Is that our place? It's difficult. And that's the question that, you know, we kind of have to ask ourselves. So this helping document is also found on familiesanonymous.org, their website, but I have copies here. It is, I like the end that says, I will give others credit for attempts at progress and for having had many victories that are unknown. I too am always changing, and I can make that change a constructive one if I'm willing. I can change myself, others I can only love. I just love it. And to break it down and to try to kind of live with those nuggets every day is a pretty beautiful thing. All right, so I'm just going to close out. These are all the different meetings that we have currently at the center. There's our website, my contact information. We have some different meetings than some others. We've got a great Infidelity Survivors Anonymous. That's a women's only. That is a great meeting. That's one you're not going to find a lot of. We started Internet and Technology Addicts Anonymous. That's kind of tricky because someone who's gaming and, Facebook, are they really addicted to internet and technology? Don't know. But what we're learning is that they're trying to manage screen time. And so, visit our website, call me on the phone, and I'll help navigate anybody at any time. So thanks for having me so much. And there you have it, the end.
Are you open to some questions?
Yes, I am. I'm sorry.
Sure, you wanted to go back to 1 and 2 so I could get a photo.
Sure. Step 1 and 2.
Please, I appreciate it.
So there's 1.
Yeah.
Are those the family anonymous steps?
It's kind of a mix. Some of them I kind of took from there, and others I kind of took from just kind of some of AA, and just kind of the ones that stuck out to me. I had to mix them up.
If we email you, can we get the slides?
Yes,
Okay.
you can. I will be more than happy to do slides. I did bring some meeting schedules if somebody needs any of that.
And number 2.
Number 2.
Thank you.
Oh, number 2. Yes. It's pretty great. Yes.
Are you an LCDC?
No, I'm not. I'm a chaplain, and I'm a person in long-term recovery myself, and so I just kind of do what I do with lived experience mostly, and then I walk with a lot of families that come through the center. So yeah.
If anybody online wants to ask a question, they can type it in the chat. We'll relay it.
Okay, sure. And I'm so grateful, for all those folks that are here that came to support me in the ministry. I'm so grateful, so
Well,
grateful.
we had 10 people online.
Nice, yay to everybody online too. It's good. Okay.
Again, if anybody online has questions, this would be a great opportunity to type them in the chat and we can relay them. Are there any other questions for Andrea?
Yeah, I had heard, because I've made a couple of referrals over there for attorneys in recovery, and they were trying to be anonymous. Is that, do you still have that? Or doctors in recovery?
So we've got doctors. We do have a referral source for lawyers and dentists. Not the lawyers and the dentists aren't meeting at our center. They're still virtual, but the doctors are in person. And on our website, they have the person that they have to contact because they have to register beforehand. The doctors do. But yes, they're back in person on Wednesday nights.
So they think they're really anonymous in today's world.
Yeah. Well, it's quite interesting because, at our center, we have one side of the building that has an entrance, right, that goes right out to the parking lot. And for those who may or may not know, we're going to be building a new building, but the reason for that and in the new building for that is so that they can come from that side and they don't have to go through the rest of the house. So they're anonymous, trying to keep it as anonymous as possible for that particular
I've seen
group.
folks merge. I mean, they'll start off that way and then they're going into other groups.
Yeah.
Anyway.
We had a request from the online audience. She showed the slide for numbers 1 through 5 again to say recovery is. That way people can do screenshots, I'm guessing.
Step 1 through 5.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. There's 1.
And then if folks wanted a copy of the slideshow, how could they reach out to you?
They can reach out to me.
They can just send it to us and we'll forward it.
Yeah,
Just to
or
info.
and on the last slide, it has my contact information, so I'll pull that up real quick, and then they can contact me that way for the slides. Or they should have been able to get in 5.
Another question online was, do you have referrals for psychiatrists?
Yes. So they can contact me, so there's my contact information and everything there, that they can contact me and I'll help them with some referrals for that. I know Dina and Daniel probably have.
Yeah, we're happy to help folks who need referrals for really any part of the community. That's one of the reasons we've tried to stay as active in the community as we can, is to help provide resources for whatever folks are looking for, whether that's within D2 or just in the community. We're fairly well tapped in. And
Yeah.
between the three of us, we probably can get most questions answered.
Probably, yeah.
But we do have psychiatrists that we refer to as well. Depending on circumstances, people have different requirements of insurance, or they want to be able to focus on this issue. We've got a pretty good idea of who's doing what in the community. We're happy to be a resource there. Again, info at D2 counseling or something like that. Any other questions online? Okay. Well, listen, we want to thank Andrea Tabor again. Thank you for the opportunity to let us learn more about your ministry and your activities in the community. We thank you for that. And again, if you need CEUs for this, the folks here in the room, we can get that address before you leave, or info at D2 counseling. And then next month, would like to remind you that our speaker will be third Tuesday of the month. And then please watch for information about changes that are going on with the lecture series.
Yeah, we had some changes in the schedule, so we don't know. We're juggling some speakers for next month, so we'll let you know. Thank you so much. I love how respectful that was, and the new way is so much more loving and kind. And it's just good to hear it and see it summarized like that. Appreciate that.
So thank you all and have a good evening.
Thank you.